When Chris and I put this down on for this week, for the Attitude Week, I just laughed and said, "Oh, there's going to be 2 or 3 people in the workshop. They're just going to be mad at me for this one." And 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 if you're one of those 2 people or 3 people, just don't let me know. Just get over it. Keep going. Okay? I'm trying to teach you how to have a good attitude to become a professional fiction writer. When you're a professional fiction writer, I'm talking about long-term professional fiction writer. You know, people have 1 or 2 novels or 3 novels. Let me give you something here that, right at this point in time, that is an attitude adjustment. And then I'll talk about what I was going to talk about in this one. My dear friend who died last August, a year ago August, Bill Trojan, the book dealer and book collector, had been around a very long time. And those who know Bill, they either loved him or hated him. He was a curmudgeon. Most indie bookstore owners are curmudgeons. He owned his own bookstore, science fiction and a mystery bookstore. But he was a real don't pull punches, don't put up with fools lightly, a brilliant man. Just almost finished his doctorate in psychology to become a psychology teacher. He had like 5 degrees and was scholarships and merits, all kinds of stuff when he was back in school. And he owned his own bookstore, and he was just a jerk. But he was my best friend. And the first time I met him, I was a neophyte writer. I was a beginning writer. And I had just sold to Writers of the Future and to Damon Knight, the Grand Master of Science Fiction. I'd sold him a short story for a book called the Clarion Awards. And the Clarion Awards had just come out, and it had Lucius Shepard, Nina Creaky Hoffman, and my first short story in it, plus a number of others. And, and so I walked up, I was at a convention, and I walked up to Bill's table. I did not know him yet. And he was talking with, and I said, I looked at the Clarion Awards that was sitting there, and I said, "Would you like me to sign those? I have a story in there." And he looked at me, and he said, quote, "Why would I want any neo-pro defacing my books?" Unquote. Well, as a young 32-year-old neo-pro, or 33-year-old neo-pro at that point, I was pretty teed off at that statement. So I told him in no uncertain terms what he could do with himself in graphic language, and I walked away. And I didn't talk to him for another year, so I didn't see him. I moved to Eugene, didn't know that's where his bookstore was, ended up running into him. He ended up becoming one of my best friends. He was one of the major supporters of Pulp House, and always a major supporter of writers. But his belief system was, you were a neo-pro until you had sold your 10th novel to New York. Bottom line, you were a neo-pro. And he called me and Chris neo-pros until one day I walked in, and I flopped a contract down at lunch. We were having lunch together, and I threw this contract in front of him, and I said, "Bantam Books, 11th. Can I not be a neo-pro?" And he started laughing and said, "Yeah, you're not a neo-pro. You're a full-time pro. You've made it through the gauntlet of people who are going to be around." And in hindsight, he was absolutely right. He was absolutely right. I as an old curmudgeon myself now, I look back at a couple writers that have 2 or 3 or 4 novels and go, "Oh, yeah, well, talk to me when you have 15. I literally, it's that bad in my head. Yes, I was around Bill for a lot of years, but so some of it wore off. But the truth of the matter is, I see so many writers coming and going after 1 or 2 books, and coming and going after 1 or 2 short stories. They just come and vanish and come and vanish, and seem like they think, mostly the reason they vanish is because they think they know it all. "Oh, I've sold a novel. I don't have to learn anymore." And those people are going to be gone, boom, in short order. So, you just shrug and say, "Oh, those are people who keep learning and keep having the desire to learn and keep selling and keep handling failure like I talked about, they're going to be around for a while." Okay? So that's where a lot of this attitude is coming from is, it takes a while to become a full-time professional in this business, and somebody who understands the business. This is not something you can do overnight, gang. I hate to say that. So there's an attitude adjustment right there. Go for the long haul, and I will talk about that later too. But right now, I'm talking about us old-timers. Don't read reviews. Don't read reviews. Start now in the beginning of your career not reading reviews. Don't care, period. What you do, because you're going to need some reviews at times and parts out of reviews, is have a significant other or a good friend who can find and read the reviews for you. And then they can give you the good reviews that say good things that you can use for pull quotes for future books. And then you start a file full of pull quotes full of good reviews. But if your friend and significant other finds a bad review, or someone's just trashing your book or trashing you as an individual, which happens all the time, I'm afraid, especially if you get out in front like Chris and I have been over the years. Well, I'll tell you, that, we're just targets for everybody. And I got enemies that I've never even met and never did anything to, but for some reason they think I'm Satan incarnated here. Same with Chris. So, if you're going to do things, you got to expect to have people that don't like you, and you got to expect to have people who like what you're doing. So, don't read reviews. Have someone else read them for you and give you the good ones. And then you got to make them promise that they will never, ever mention, they can't even mention it in passing. Oh, you got a bad review in Locus. Or a bad review in Publishers Weekly. Don't read reviews. They can't even mention it to you. They got to just hope you never see it by accident. And that's their job. Set that up now. Set it up now. Because trust me, it will save you days, weeks, months, maybe your entire career. Because here's the second part of this advice. Don't become a critic. Never, ever allow yourself to say anything bad about another book or another writer. There's a little aspect in the world called taste. Okay, I personally love Clive Cussler. And so when we were doing master classes here on the coast, I forced everybody in every class, as part of the reading assignment before they got here, to read Clive Cussler. Because beginning writers, all they can see is sentence by sentence. They don't have any idea what good storytelling is. All they see are sentence by sentence, and Cussler is not the best sentence by sentence writer. He's one of the best storytellers on the planet. But he's one of the not so good at sentence by sentence, and beginning writers all think sentence by sentence is the be-all and end-all of all writing. Correct grammar, correct this, correct details. Oh, that's what makes a good story. It's not even close to what makes a good story. Cussler sells 1.2 million books every time he puts out a new Dirk Pitt novel in hardback. All right? You can criticize Dirk when you sell 1.3 million books every time you put out a new hardback. Until then, you have no right to criticize him. You have a right, however, as an individual, to have taste. Cussler may not be to your taste. Danielle Steele may not be to your taste. Definitely not my taste. Heck of a fine writer, and I study her all the time. Would I pick up one of her books and buy it? Oh, heavens, no. No, it's not to my taste. I mean, I love writers like Lawrence Block. They are the ones I study, and Cussler and Dean Koontz and people like that. Those are the ones that I study, and they are to my taste. But I also study Danielle Steele, not to my taste. Okay? And I study other ones because I want to learn what they're doing right. So taste is perfectly valid to have as an individual. We all have books that we like and don't like, and that's perfectly valid. Don't say anything about them. But like Chris does on her blog, she does the recommended reading. Every month she puts out recommended reading. On my blog, every time I find a book that I think is really cool, I mention it. Do I ever go along and talk about the ones that I got halfway through and put it down and never bothered to go back? No, and why should I bother? Okay? Don't be a critic. Don't read reviews. I'm going to say one thing here to end this that will make a couple people mad. Live with it. The common knowledge among long-term writers is that all critics are failed writers. All reviewers are failed writers. And if you actually stop and look at it and scratch the surface of some of even the well-known critics, you'll discover that that's exactly what they are. They're people who really, really want to write but can't seem to put it together, can't seem to figure it out, can't seem to get out of their own way. And it's really easy to take somebody else's book and tear it apart. So critics are either English teachers or failed writers. and often one and the same. Sorry if that made you mad. Don't read reviews. Have a friend read your reviews. And for heaven's sakes, don't become a critic. It may be the best advice I ever give you. It may be worth this entire workshop fee if you take that to heart and live by it. More attitude in a moment.